Associates, discuss the changes that you see in the application, and really try and center on some of the business benefits that can be achieved through the use of S4 HANA. Go ahead, Mike. So quickly on Dickinson Associates, I think many of the attendees that I see online have some exposure to Dickinson Associates, but we are a holistic SAP shop. We focus only on the SAP products, and therefore we try to be very holistic in our capabilities with SAP. We are a reseller of the software to the small and medium enterprise space, and specifically focus with today's changing market on the platforms of S4 HANA and analytics. So I'm sure many of the organizations on the line are ECC users, legacy R3 or ECC users. S4 HANA is really the next generation of SAP, providing enhanced capabilities in the area of finance and logistics. But most importantly, what drives some of those benefits is the new structure of the underlying data that allows for a whole new way to access information. So through HANA Live content, data and reporting becomes much more robust. It can actually involve predictive types of activities. And with the new user interface, SAP Fiore, there are many innovations that allow you to access data not only sitting at your desktop computer in your office, but from your mobile phone, and in many different ways. So it really is the product that is going to be the next 20-year generation, 30-year generation of ERP packages. Dickinson and Associates does do work in all of the core SAP products, including S4 HANA, Business Objects. HANA is a development platform itself. HANA is not just a database, it is actually a development platform that applications can be written on. And then the evolving cloud technology. So there's many options available for the use of S4 HANA today. It can still be an on-premise model. It can be a private cloud option, and the public cloud options are actually being rolled out as we speak. We also concentrate on a number of industries, including industrial machinery and components, mill products, consumer goods, chemical, aerospace and defense, and financial services. Dickinson also provides application support services. Go ahead, Mike. So to wrap that up, for those of you who don't know us, our organization tries to find the business value. Most of our consultants actually come out of industry. They've sat on the customer side of the table, and therefore we've always thought of ourselves as business people who know SAP. We employ people who are ex-controllers, ex-shop floor professionals, ex-customer service professionals, and really try to drive that business value. S4 HANA presents a unique opportunity with that. There are really new capabilities that are available that are absolutely focused on providing improved business value. So hopefully today's webinar will expose you to many of those. And with that, I will pass it to Mike Belcher.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everybody. Hello, my name is Mike Belcher. Thank you for joining me today. I'm a manager in our Solutions Engineering Group here at Dickinson and Associates, and my focus is on SAP Financials. I've been working with SAP for over 20 years now in many different industries, a lot in the manufacturing space. Now, there's been many innovations in SAP over the years, but in my opinion, none have been greater than the introduction of S4 HANA Financials. Okay? I'm going to share some of these innovations with you today. We will not be reviewing every single innovation with S4 HANA Finance. Otherwise, we'd be here a very long time. So we've got a relatively short amount of time. So instead, I'm going to focus this webinar on those innovations that I think will be beneficial to just about every user of S4 HANA Financials. Okay, there are other innovations, while very impressive, that really may not apply to some customers. For example, S4 HANA Finance contains new functionality called Central Finance. Perhaps some of you have heard of it. It's intended for customers that really have multiple ERP systems. So I think of a company that has grown through acquisition and has acquired businesses either on multiple instances of SAP or possibly multiple ERPs other than SAP. So think of Central Finance as an instance of SAP that resides above all other ERPs and then communicates seamlessly with them in real time. It replicates the financial transactions from the SAP and non-SAP ERP source systems into Central Finance that runs on S4 HANA Finance. So every time you post a document in any of these source systems, it's immediately replicated in the Central Finance environment. Okay? And one of the benefits is this provides a non-disruptive path towards S4 HANA Finance without the need for traditional upgrade. We all know how time-consuming and expensive that can be, especially for large organizations involving multiple rollouts. So clearly, this is an amazing innovation. There's absolutely no disputing that. However, many of the companies certainly that I deal with are not running multiple ERPs. So this is an example of an innovation that would not necessarily benefit every S4 HANA Finance customer. So as I mentioned, this webinar really is going to focus on the innovation that I believe will benefit just about every S4 HANA Finance user. So before we get into these exciting new innovations, let's take just a moment to talk about terminology. You may have heard terms such as Simple Finance 1.0, Simple Finance 2.0, SFIN 1503, SFIN 1511, et cetera. It goes on and on. Now, all of these terms refer to what is more broadly known as SAP S4 HANA Finance. The initial branding as Simple Finance, in my opinion, may be somewhat misleading in that it could be interpreted as simpler functionality. And this is definitely not the case. There's more functionality in SAP Finance now than ever before. The term simple simply referred to the simplified data model, which I'm going to go into detail today. So without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation. So here's a graphical representation of the architecture that we're going to be discussing today. So starting at the bottom, we see the three characteristics that really are associated with S4 HANA Finance: aligned, agile, and predictive. So it's aligned in a sense that it's a single source of the truth. We're really going to hammer that point home today, and I'll explain that more in subsequent slides. It's agile, and then it's real-time processes. Okay? I'm also going to explain this a little bit later on how the S4 HANA database makes this possible. And it's predictive in that it contains very dynamic planning and analysis capabilities. Okay? So on top of the S4 HANA database, we see the Business Suite on HANA, which is where we find the financials add-on. Okay, we see that the S4 HANA Finance is comprised of three components: SAP Accounting powered by SAP HANA, SAP Cash Management powered by SAP HANA, and SAP Integrated Business Planning for Finance. So really three different pieces. The SAP Cash Management powered by HANA is what's traditionally been known as cash management, cash and liquidity management, or treasury. So this is where you would find the sort of advanced banking and cash management functions. You can still do basic bank management functions such as creating house banks without SAP Cash Management powered by HANA. But if you want, again, the more advanced functionality such as hedging and liquidity planning, you'll need SAP Cash Management powered by SAP HANA. SAP Integrated Business Planning for Finance is where you'll find the enhanced planning capabilities, as well as enhanced integration with BPC, which stands for Business Planning and Consolidations. In fact, I believe a new version is going to be coming out very soon that has embedded BPC that allows both planning and consolidations. The current embedded version is designed for planning only. So I believe very soon you'll be seeing an offering that allows embedded BPC for both planning and consolidations. But our focus today is going to be SAP Accounting powered by HANA, as it's, of course, highlighted in red here, and that's what we'll focus on today. So first, we'll talk about the new user interface, SAP Fiore. So this is SAP's new modern user face for SAP. For those of you that have experienced the traditional SAP GUI screens, you can see that really this is a tremendous benefit. Of course, it's got a very modern look and feel. Users see apps very similar to the apps you would find on your smartphone. And so this slide shows some of the key benefits associated with the new Fiore user interface. It's role-based, so designed for you, your needs, and how you work. Users see only the apps associated with their business roles. So if I work in accounts receivable, okay, I'm going to log into Fiore. My homepage is only going to include the apps associated with AR. So I might see a tile with a total outstanding AR, or my total overdue AR, my dispute cases, my customer fact sheets. And this functionality was previously addressed in prior versions of SAP with SAP GUI favorites. SAP Fiore is adaptive, so it adapts to multiple use cases and devices. This is one of the most appealing features, I believe. So most apps can be run on a desktop, a laptop, or really any mobile device, whether that be an iPad, an iPhone, Apple Watch, you name it. Most of these apps can run on any of those platforms. SAP Fiore is simple. So users see only what is necessary. And users, in many of the business functions, users see only the fields that are required to perform those business functions. Again, if you're familiar with the previous versions of SAP, some of the screens are a bit busy with a lot of fields that you don't necessarily need to populate. In Fiore, the screens are greatly simplified. Fiore is coherent, so it provides one fluid, intuitive experience. The complexity of the input screens has been removed, as I mentioned, and users can branch from one app into another based on logical business processes. So there's not accessing a bunch of different screens. You're just going into the screens that are necessary to perform those business functions. Some of you may have seen YouTube videos where you've got users performing the same transactions in the SAP GUI versus Fiore. And when looking at the end result in terms of the number of clicks, the time it took to perform those functions, there are tremendous savings when it comes to Fiore. And think about that. Even if you're saving 10 mouse clicks and 2 minutes for a transaction such as Cash App that you're performing 50 or 100 times a day, you know, that really adds up each day, each week, each year, and that translates into real savings. And lastly, it's delightful. The modern user interface makes an emotional connection. And I think you'll agree, when you get into using SAP Fiore, you'll find that it's a much better experience than the traditional SAP GUI. So there are 3 types of Fiore apps that you'll find. We have transactional apps, and these apps let you perform transactional tasks such as post incoming payments. They represent simplified use and interaction with existing business processes and solutions. We also have fact sheets. Okay, these are apps that display contextual information and key facts about central objects used in your business operations. From a fact sheet area, you can drill down into details. For example, if I'm in a customer fact sheet, I can very quickly branch into the customer line items, the AR aging for that customer, just about anything I need for that customer. Another example might be open dispute cases with that customer. So starting from that fact sheet, I can very easily and logically branch to other business functions that I might need to perform. And then lastly, we have analytical apps or smart business cockpits. These apps let you get role-based insight into real-time operations of your business by collecting and displaying key figures directly in your browser. You can closely monitor your most important KPIs in real time and react immediately on changes in market conditions or operations. So a listing of all Fiore apps can be found online in the Fiore Apps library at the website that you see on the slide. Additionally, custom apps can be developed using tools such as the KPI modeler. And the activation of an app typically contains at least some element of basis, a little bit of security, and possibly some minor configuration. Now again, the focus of this webinar really isn't Fiore. This is simply one piece of it. But later this year, we will be conducting a webinar dedicated exclusively to Fiore. And during that future webinar, I'll use Fiore to perform a number of business functions within AR, AP, and other finance areas. So really, I think any in-depth discussion about the benefits of S4 HANA Finance has to begin with the HANA database itself, because it really is the foundation upon which S4 HANA is built. Almost every SAP user has experienced transactions, reports, batch jobs that run for long periods of time. Could be several minutes, could even be several hours. I've been at clients where a batch job has run for almost 40 hours. Seems crazy, but many of you with SAP experience have experienced something similar. Now, those days are gone with S4 HANA Finance. The HANA database can process hundreds of thousands of records in just a few seconds. Let's talk about what does HANA mean. Okay, HANA stands for High Performance Analytical Appliance. SAP HANA transforms businesses by streamlining transactions, analytics, planning, and predictive data processing on a single in-memory database so businesses can operate in real time. So what does in-memory mean? In-memory means all data is stored in memory, the RAM. There's no wasted time in loading data from a hard disk into RAM. Everything is in memory all the time, which gives the CPU quick access for processing. So another key feature of the HANA database is it utilizes columnar storage versus row storage. And storing data by column results in better compression than conventional row storage. It also performs well while query processing, since queries read only the columns which are required. So essentially, what that translates to is we have sort of unlimited indices for our data. This isn't really a new concept. Columnar storage has been around for actually many years. However, the combination of columnar storage combined with in-memory computing makes SAP HANA a game changer. And mainly because there's no pre-aggregation required. Users don't have to wait hours to get data that they need. A flexible ad hoc analysis can be performed at any time. It's no longer necessary to extract data to a data warehouse for analysis. Your transactional processing and your analytical processing can be done in the same system. So OLTP and OLAP done in the same system. SAP S/4HANA is the only database that allows this. So why SAP HANA? So as a result of all of the features I just mentioned, SAP HANA enables businesses to make smarter, certainly faster decisions through real-time analysis and reporting combined with dramatically accelerated business processes. The lack of delay between insight and action results in a real-time business. Now think about this concept in your current ERP environment. If you're dealing with big data, most likely your reporting is dependent on pre-aggregation, which means your data has to be extracted from your transactional processing system into your analytical processing environment, such as a data warehouse. Again, those days are gone. There's going to be no delay. As soon as you process a transaction, it can be immediately analyzed at a detail level or at a macro level. So let's take an example. So this is based on a study that was done by SAP. And so sort of a typical database would be maybe 593 gigs. And so simply by transitioning to the HANA database, you can reduce that data footprint to only 118.6 gigs. So this is an improvement by a multiple of 5. A significant, as I mentioned, a significant factor in this is that you no longer need a data warehouse. Okay? Your transactional system and your analytical system become one system, S/4HANA. And because of that, you're really reducing your data footprint. So this slide depicts really the traditional table structure, both in finance and logistics. And now we switch to S/4HANA Finance. So notice that the table structure is greatly simplified. Many of those boxes are removed. And as a result, we have a much smaller data footprint. Now I'm going to talk more about the tables that were removed and how the same or even better reporting is available now. But you can see that now we've gone from 118.6 gigs down to a 42.4 gig footprint. So that's, again, that's another factor of improvement of 3. And that's mainly accomplished through the elimination of redundant tables, both in finance and logistics. Like I said, I'll explain this in more detail in just a couple of slides. So let's take it a step further. So through data aging, we can reduce that data footprint even more, so down to 8.4 gigs. This is another improvement by a factor of 5. So what is data aging? So only the operational relevant data, what we call hot or current data, is loaded into the main memory in HANA, sort of the in-memory. So other cold data or historical data remains primarily stored on a disk. So as such, then, it's not affecting your current data performance, yet historical data remains accessible by SQL on request. So look at the huge improvement that we're talking about here, 593 gigs down to 8.4 gigs. We have significantly reduced our data footprint and therefore our total cost of ownership. And this doesn't even begin to speak to the benefits that you'll achieve through optimized business processes that come with S4 HANA Finance. So let's start talking about S4 HANA Finance and some of the benefits that you will see. So this slide depicts some of the obstacles in the traditional SAP Finance architecture. The obstacles are primarily associated with data being stored in multiple tables and therefore different sources of the truth. In previous versions of SAP, a single business transaction, such as a material consumption in a production order, would result in multiple documents being created, for example, an accounting document, a controlling document, a profit center document, a material ledger document, and the list goes on and on. And this was done primarily to support, the efficient storage and retrieval of information within the various finance functions. It was just necessary to do that in order to access the data in a timely manner. So starting from the upper left, we see the challenges between asset accounting and general ledger. Within asset accounting, we couldn't see profit center or GL details. For example, the depreciation posting at month end was summarized when the data was passed from asset accounting over to the general ledger. The resulting accounting document did not show the individual asset details. Therefore, there was a bit of a challenge sometimes comparing asset accounting reports to the GL reports and required some reconciliation. Then moving over to the top right, we see the challenges between the controlling module and the general ledger. So allocations and settlements within the controlling module are passed back to the general ledger, but they're passed back at a summarized level. So again, it was often challenging to kind of compare the results in the controlling module versus my financial accounting general ledger module, and therefore some reconciliation effort was required there too. So moving down, we see the challenges between profitability analysis and the general ledger. This is a classic example, but cost of goods sold in the general ledger is updated as soon as we ship the goods to a customer. But cost of goods sold in costing-based profitability analysis is updated when we invoice the customer. Therefore, there's a bit of a timing difference built into the two different functionalities, and therefore, again, a possibility for differences, certainly differences, sources of the truth, and this one certainly would require a reconciliation effort at month end. Lastly, we see the challenges between material ledger and the general ledger. Material ledger does not store profit center or GL details. Again, different versions of the truth, and all of these issues could result in extended effort to reconcile all these different sources. So with S4 HANA Finance, we introduce a concept called single source of the truth. And that single source is called the Universal Journal. It's a single repository of journal entries across multiple applications without redundancy. Again, getting back to the concept of reducing our overall data footprint. So each of the blue bubbles on the slide represents tables that were previously updated. A single transaction, such as, let's say, applying a customer payment, could update up to 25 different tables in SAP. Seems hardly possible, but in fact, that was a reality. And again, that was so that we could store the data in a manner that it could be easily retrieved by the previous versions of SAP. Well, this is no longer required due to the in-memory computing power and the columnar storage of HANA Database. So all line item details are stored in a single table, the Universal Journal Table. And that enables real-time reporting without the need for indexes or aggregate tables. So this enables deeper, instant insight across all dimensions, easier extensibility, and process optimizations for an accelerated close. Okay, so very key concept with S/4HANA Finance is the universal journal. We're sort of consolidating all of these line item tables into a single table. So this slide depicts the combination of the 5 main finance line item tables into the single universal journal table. And just for your information, the actual table name for that universal journal table is ACDOCA, AC-DOC-A. So as mentioned previously, the benefits of the universal journal are the following. One line item table with full details for all components. So think of one table that contains, for any posting, any customer-related information, any material-related information, certainly all of my organizational-related information, and then all of my profitability analysis-related information. So all of that combined into a single table. And as such, because we're getting rid of all these other aggregate tables and line item tables, there's going to be no more reconciliation needed. And of course, that's going to reduce our overall data footprint through the elimination of redundancy, and it's going to allow us to do fast multi-dimensional reporting based on this universal journal table. And again, as I mentioned before, there's no need to replicate all of this data in a data warehouse in order to retrieve it. S/4HANA Finance can retrieve this very detailed information very quickly and very easily. So this slide lists the index tables and the aggregate tables that no longer exist in S/4HANA Finance. And really, if you're familiar with SAP, you can see that these are some of the most frequently used tables in SAP. We see some of the customer and vendor tables that are really key to reporting open and cleared items. Same with GL accounts. And again, we see a lot of our aggregate tables. In the next slide, this shows the additional tables that no longer exist in S/4HANA Finance. And again, these are some of the most frequently used tables in SAP. For example, table COEP is traditionally one of the largest tables in the entire database. This is the CO line item table. So again, if any of you are existing SAP customers and you've written many custom reports or ABAP reports against these tables, you might be sweating, but don't worry. All those tables that I referenced on the previous slide, they physically do not exist in S/4HANA Finance. However, each has what's called a compatibility view. So effectively, this is a mapping of the fields in those tables that no longer exist to the corresponding fields in my universal journal table. So this allows SAP to rebuild those tables on the fly as necessary and only when necessary. So as a result, all of your custom reports will still work once you migrate to S/4HANA Finance. So as the slide shows, when you display one of these tables in SE16N, you can see that SAP calls it a generated table for view. However, for all intents and purposes, the table and the information looks and acts as if it's still there. So again, this is an amazing innovation within S/4HANA Finance. We've reduced our overall data footprint, yet we're providing the same capabilities with a much simpler model. We'll talk about the relationship, the new relationship between GL accounts and cost elements. So GL accounts and cost elements are combined into a single record in S/4HANA Finance. And I think this makes perfect sense, especially in the case of a primary cost element, because before they were one for one. One GL account equaled one P&L account equaled one primary cost element. So that relationship really makes perfect sense. And we can see that this slide shows that the cost element category is a new field on the control data tab of the GL master record. So if you look at the screenshot on the right-hand side towards the bottom of that screen, you can see that the new GL account master record as a cost element category, and that's where you specify the appropriate category. So again, it makes perfect sense, in my mind anyways, that for primary cost elements, because again, they were always a one-for-one relationship. Now let's talk about secondary cost elements. So here we see that secondary cost elements also exist as GL accounts in S4 HANA Finance. It might take a moment to wrap your mind around this one. However, once you think it through, it also makes sense. So this means that it's no longer necessary for the system to make reconciliation postings back to F5 based on allocations from within CO. So think back through a traditional model in SAP. When you allocate cost in the controlling module, either from a cost center to a production order between cost centers, SAP would pass that information back to F5, again, to keep both modules whole, through what are called reconciliation postings, which again were these summarized postings. Well, now, because we're creating our secondary cost elements also as GL accounts, again, that reconciliation posting is no longer necessary. This really gets back to the concept of one version of the truth. So again, the key point here is in S4 HANA Finance, GL accounts and cost elements are one record. Again, reducing that overall data footprint. So this next feature is cost of goods sold posted to GL accounts by cost component. So this is actually a feature that many of my customers have been asking for years. And in some cases, we'd have to write complex ABAP reports, custom reports to provide this type of reporting. So what I'm showing on this slide is kind of the traditional cost of goods sold posting in SAP. I'm simply shipping a product to a customer. And when I do that in financial accounting, I get really just a two-line journal entry: credit inventory and debit cost of goods sold. Now, what I'm able to do in S4 HANA Finance, I can split that cost of goods sold posting by cost component. Now, previously, to see this type of information, you had two options. Again, write a custom report if you wanted the information directly out of the general ledger, or two, you had to use costing-based profitability analysis. Well, in S4 HANA Finance, this capability is native in general ledger, so it can all be done in real time directly in the general ledger. So let's take a look at the slides. Here, I'm shipping two products to a customer, and if I look at the resulting accounting document on the right-hand side, I can see that ultimately SAP is splitting that cost into its cost components. So rather than seeing a lump sum posting to cost of goods sold, I see how much of that cost was related to material, labor, and overhead. So great information, again, provides a lot of data at a very detailed level in real time that I could use to kind of slice and dice and analyze my cost of goods sold. Now the configuration for this is, you'll see a new option on the IMG, which I'm showing here. And simply you're mapping your single cost of goods sold accounts to different cost of goods sold accounts by cost components. Okay? And if you've got multiple cost of goods sold accounts, for example, third party versus intercompany, you can still maintain that split in this mapping. Now, similar functionality is available within production order variances. So if you're familiar with SAP in previous versions, you know that at month end, one of my processes related to production order closing was to calculate production order variances for my orders that are complete. And that would calculate all of my different variance categories, whether they be input price variances, input quantity variances, or any of the 8 variance categories. And then the last part of that was to settle those variances to the general ledger. And then we get passed back to the general ledger in a single GL account called production order variance. And if I wanted to do variance category reporting, I had to go to the CO module. If I just want a GL reporting, well, I'd go to the general ledger. Well, SAP has combined that into the general ledger. So what I'm showing now is the new functionality that's available with S4 HANA Finance. So we have the capability to post production order variances to the general ledger by variance category. So rather than having one lump sum posted to the general ledger, I actually can see I can create different GL accounts for my input price variances, input quantity variances, resource usage variances. So I can have, again, have one-stop shopping for all my analysis. Again, one source of the truth. I no longer have to go to COPA, Profitability Analysis, or CO, production order reporting to see those production order variance details. I have all that information available directly in my GL. Now let's take a look at the configuration associated with that. So again, you'll see a new option on the IMG. And again, the configuration is pretty simple. We're just mapping the variance categories to the corresponding GL accounts. It does not have to be a one-for-one mapping. I can summarize, or I can group my variance categories into higher level GL accounts if that's what I want to see, or I can do it one-for-one if I want to see the greatest detail in my general ledger. So again, another option that really gets back to that concept of one version of the truth. Again, I no longer have to go to CO for one type of reporting and the GL for other type of reporting. I've got one-stop shopping. It's updating a single table behind the scenes. And again, I've reduced my overall data footprint. Let's talk about overhead on production orders. And I think this really is a significant change. Not only for users of SAP, but I think even for consultants that implement SAP. So let's take a look at the typical overhead calculation. So typically, overhead is calculated on production orders at month end through either individually through a transaction code, KGI2, or collectively for example, for an entire plant, CO43. But since it was a month-end transaction, I really didn't absorb my overhead until month end. So I really didn't know if I was under-absorbed, over-absorbed until month end. And if I wanted to see more frequent absorption, I really had two options. One is just run this transaction more frequently, either daily or weekly, but that really wasn't a great option. But the other option was don't use the costing sheet to absorb overhead. Use activity types to absorb the overhead. And what that meant was I had to create activity types such for overhead absorption. Now, many of us are familiar with activity types in the routing for direct labor, machine time, and those are very real functions. I can visualize what is direct labor and what is my machine runtime, and that makes sense to have those times and activities maintained in a routing. But in order to get more frequent absorption of my overhead, I would have to create activity types called variable overhead, fixed overhead, and put that into my routing as well. And that gets confusing. When you're looking at a routing, there's nothing real called fixed overhead minutes and variable overhead minutes. It just didn't make sense. And also, in the routing, you only have 6 spaces where you can maintain activities. And if you're using activities to absorb your overhead, well, you're taking up space, valuable space in the routing for costing purposes that they're really intended for production purposes. But with S/4HANA Finance, we have the capability to do real-time overhead calculation. So to me, this is a game changer. So using the costing sheet, the moment a production order confirmation is processed, SAP will calculate the overhead and post the absorption. It'll debit the production order, credit the cost center for the appropriate amount of the absorption. So my overhead application and therefore my absorption is no longer a month-end transaction. It happens in real time. So let's take a look at an example of this. So in the upper left screenshot, just showing a confirmation. I'm consuming 2 materials against a production order. And in the lower left-hand side, I can see that really 2 accounting documents were generated for this. That's a bit unusual. But when I look at the screenshots on the right, it makes more sense. So one of my screenshots on the bottom right is for the material consumption. A typical example, consume raw materials out of inventory, debit my consumption expense. But the accounting on the top right is a result of the real-time overhead calculation. You can see in real time, SAP is posting the appropriate amount of absorption against the production order and crediting my overhead cost center. So this really means that it's going to be no longer necessary to kind of muddle up my routings with overhead activities. I can really rely exclusively on my costing sheet to absorb my overhead because, again, now it is a real-time calculation. So here's some of the configuration related to the real-time overhead calculation. You can see the new option in the orders menu path. It's really a very simple activation. It's really just a checkbox to say turn the functionality on. Now in S/4HANA Finance, you will see some new transactions. Some of the old transactions actually no longer exist, and many of those actually haven't been used in years, but they still existed within the database, and many of those are gone now. But you will see some new transactions as well. Now, what I'm showing you here is a couple of new transactions related to period end closing for production orders, which are typically your overhead, your WIP calculation, overhead calculation, variance calculation, and month-end settlement. We can see here from the screenshots, there are two new transactions, one related to my work in process calculation and one related to my variance calculation. Now, these are simply optimized transactions. They're able to process the data much more efficiently. And so we should see roughly a 10 to 40% improvement as a result of these new transaction codes. Again, performing much of the same functionality as the old ones, just doing it much, much faster. And I guess the importance of this is not to be understated. When I mentioned before that I've been at clients where I've seen batch jobs run for 40 hours, one of those batch jobs was related to production order variances. And if you think about it, if you're accumulating hundreds of thousands of production orders in your system, think about a very high volume system environment, you can easily accumulate several thousands, even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of production orders. And so some of these month-end batch jobs related to month-end closing for orders can be very, very time-consuming. Now, those jobs are going to run much, much more efficiently as a result of these new transactions. Now, another key innovation is related to fixed asset line items. I mentioned before when talking about some of the traditional issues, reconciliation issues between the general ledger and the different other submodules such as asset accounting I mentioned, they were posted at different levels of detail. In asset accounting, I of course had all my detailed asset records, but when that information was passed over to the general ledger, often it was summarized, and so I didn't see individual asset detail in my general ledger. Well, in S/4HANA Finance, I get line for line. So I have the lowest level of detail available in both asset accounting and also in my universal journal in S/4HANA Finance. Again, no more reconciliation effort involved. It's the same data that's being reported in assets versus the general ledger. Again, read the same tables, and therefore no longer is there going to be a need to reconcile any differences. Again, it really gets back to that concept of one version of the truth. So let's talk a couple moments about profitability analysis. So again, very significant changes in this area. I think first and foremost, the biggest change is the fact that account-based profitability analysis becomes the default in S/4HANA Finance. So those of you familiar with profitability analysis in previous versions of SAP probably understand that costing-based profitability analysis was sort of the default. You would implement costing-based COPA, and then only implement account-based, if you saw a need, but often it was only costing-based COPA. And then I guess the reasons were numerous, but in S/4HANA Finance, really account-based COPA becomes the default, okay? And the reason for this is a couple of reasons, and two of which I already mentioned. When it comes to splitting cost of goods sold by cost component, well, now in S/4HANA Finance, I can do that directly in the general ledger. I don't need to rely on COPA reporting to see that detail. I've got it right there in my general ledger. So again, that's one reason I don't have to rely on costing-based COPA to do that. Another reason is, again, that split of production order variances. I'm able to get that information directly from my general ledger. Therefore, I don't really need to go to COPA anymore to see that level of detail. Again, I've got that all built into my general ledger. So costing-based COPA is still going to exist and still going to be supported. However, I believe any new enhancements with COPA really are going to focus on account-based COPA, not costing-based. So it's still going to be there, but I think any new cool features that will be rolled out will be primarily associated with account-based COPA in the future. But of course, you can still use both if there's a need. So we'll talk about when would there be a need to continue to use costing-based COPA. Well, one would be if you want to do multiple valuations of cost of goods sold. So maybe I've created some additional cost estimates based on FIFO cost or some what-if cost estimates, and I want to see what would my cost of goods sold, my unit sold, what would that look like based on these other cost categories or other categories of cost? Or what if I'm doing a parallel valuation into a different currency? Well, I still need costing-based COPA to do some of that functionality. So there's still a need for costing-based COPA in some cases, and primarily it's related to the multiple valuations of cost of goods sold. This is one of my favorites. Again, if you're an existing SAP customer, you probably know that ABAP queries are, in my opinion, an invaluable tool for ad hoc reporting. I can very quickly join a couple of tables and get some information that I need. I can join customer tables with some of my GL tables or material tables. The possibilities really are endless. So one of the traditional obstacles in previous versions of SAP is the table BSEG, my financial accounting line item tables, could not be used in any joins. Well, those days are gone. In S4 HANA Finance, I can join my universal journal table, which is table ACDOCA. I can use that table in joins. I can also use my compatibility view for table BSEG, my line item table, in table joins. So again, might seem like a small thing, but if you're a big fan of ABAP queries, as I am, then this innovation will be very, very useful, because you can very quickly and easily create these ABAP queries, and therefore it may not be necessary to write very time-consuming and expensive ABAP reports. You can just write a quick and easy ABAP query to get a lot of the information that you need. So again, I really wanted to focus on, as I said, there are many more innovations within SAP HANA Finance, but I really wanted to focus on really those innovations that you're going to get right out of the box, and just about every user of S4 HANA Finance are going to realize. So let's open it up to questions. So I've received a few questions as the demo's been going on, so let's talk about those. So first question, since cost elements and GL accounts are merged into a single record, does this mean that all P&L accounts must also be a cost element? The answer is no. So one of the account types on the first screen of a GL record in S4 HANA Finance is called account type. And one of the options in there is non-operating expense or income. So if you choose this category, non-operating expense or income, then that GL account is not a cost element. And that makes sense in some cases. For example, let's talk about interest expense. Yeah, of course it's a valid GL account, but do I really need to have that as a cost element? I don't really need to assign that to a cost center or an order. I don't really need someone to manage interest expense in their department or their cost center. So that's a case where I may not want to create that as a cost element. So that possibility is still there with S4 HANA Finance. So another question we have is, do you have to be on new general ledger in order to migrate to S4 HANA Finance? Good question. The answer is no. However, once you migrate to S4 HANA Finance, you will be on new GL. However, functions such as document splitting will not be activated automatically. You would need to activate these as sort of a separate initiative. And along with that, in previous versions of SAP, you could only activate new GL at a year end. So you really had to plan way in advance for that. But it's much easier now. You can implement new GL at any month end in S4 HANA Finance. So that transition to new GL is going to become much, much easier. It does not have to be a year end any longer. Next question, is planning in S4 HANA Finance possible only if you're using SAP Integrated Business Planning? Great question. Answer is no. A lot of the traditional planning functions, such as cost center planning through transactions such as KP06, those are still available in SAP Accounting powered by HANA. In addition to that, there's actually new functionality for planning directly in SAP Accounting powered by HANA that use embedded BW queries and screens and reports. So you don't necessarily need the integrated business planning to do planning in SAP. There's some nice planning functionality directly in SAP Accounting powered by HANA. Next question, what's the upgrade path to S/4HANA Finance? So if you were an existing SAP customer, I mean, probably the specific migration steps are going to vary based on kind of what starting release you're on, what business functions you want to activate. But I think I can say generally, you know, the migration path is going to involve 3 steps. You have to be on ECC 6.0 Enhancement Pack 7. So that would be your first step, is to get up to Enhancement Pack 7. Next, you would migrate to the HANA Database, and then you would activate the Financials add-on for SAP Business Suite powered by HANA, and continue with implementing those enhanced business processes. And I guess if you're on a very old release of SAP, you know, it may not make sense necessarily to go through the time and effort and expense of going to Enhancement Pack 7. Maybe you would want to just, you know, start over with a greenfield implementation directly in S/4HANA Finance. And I guess that is the last question I have.
So, Mike, this is Brad Hickett. If I can add a couple comments to that last point on upgrades. So, the upgrade, I do see another question out there about upgrading and with the elimination of the tables, can you go to S/4HANA? And the answer is absolutely positively yes. So SAP has a defined upgrade path, and actually Dickinson and Associates with a partner of ours, Proterra Technologies, has developed a tool called FlexBridge that allows you to string these things together. If you think of what's occurring in a HANA upgrade, there is actually a hardware change because you're going to the appliance structure. There is a database migration because you're changing from your historical database, which might be a SQL, Oracle, DB2 type of database, to a HANA database. You're upgrading the platform itself, the actual application, obviously going to the new tool. Historically, some of those upgrades might be broken up into 2 or 3 weekends. When there's a hardware change, there's a database migration, and there's an application change. Actually, with FlexBridge, there's the capability to use kind of machine learning capabilities and understand exactly every single step that needs to be done through the migration process, and accomplish all that in a single weekend. So it's using standard SAP tools in the background, the database migration option. You still have to obviously go through the traditional upgrade activities of making sure technical objects work. So you do time, pre-runs and get timings and check SPAL and SPDD type of applications. But you absolutely positively can upgrade that, and then that exposes everything that is out there. Now, what is really S/4HANA? And that is, as Mike touched upon early, it's the ability to have Fiore Apps. It's the ability to use HANA Live type of capabilities. So now while you're on S/4HANA, you can do things like Lumira analysis straight from the transactional database. You do have apps that actually users do have some control over. There was a question about that can the analytical apps be customized by business users? And the answer to that is it depends what the customization is, but to a certain extent, yes. You have the ability to set things like variance, and you have the ability to adjust what the tile looks like. So those capabilities do exist. And much like the finance that Mike has covered quite extensively here, as you're moving into the versions that now have the S4 logistics capability, there are even changes to things like the customer and vendor master. Those become business partners rather than separate items. That they are really managed in a similar way. And if you think of the structure of a customer master and a vendor master, there were always similarities there. SAP's just really brought those together. So it is a very robust solution. Yes, there are some changes to it, but a couple of very important points. Number one, there's so much talk about Fiore. You'll notice that the screenshots that Mike had in his presentation day were not Fiore. They were GUI. You can still access the system in your historical ways. So you can actually approach the upgrade process as a crawl, walk, run process, rolling out a few select Fiore apps, beginning some basic use of HANA Live with Lumira and other business objects tools, and then really expand it and focus on the key business benefits that you'll get out of it. So if, for example, the change to COPA-based planning and being able to do that in GL is of utmost important to you, you can focus on those things first and leave others to a later optimization activity. But this really is the next generation of SAP tools, and we believe that it really opens up possibilities for organizations to resolve nagging issues that have been there for quite some time, and really addresses them in a very streamlined manner. So with that, I think we're at the top of the hour. Spencer, I will pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you both, Brad and Mike. And I know that there, I believe, have been some additional questions, and we will just follow up with those individuals directly. So thank you all again for attending, and have a great day. Bye.